Hello and welcome. I've got a lot of information to get to today, and I'm going to start with trying to turn my speaker off in case it goes haywire.
Power off.
There we go. Got a lot of information to get to today about Odin. Hail Odin and Freyja. Hail Freyja. I am glad that the thought came to do this video at this time of the year, because it is during this time of the year that we see it's when Odin teaches goddess Freyja the runes, and Freyja teaches god Odin magic. So I think it's very apropos that we get into this right now. Now, before I do that, I want to just pull up this picture here. This is what I used for the thumbnail of this video, of setting up the live stream for this video, which I'm going to check my YouTube right now, make sure it's actually streaming over. Yes. Okay, good. So I want to explain this AI generated image a little bit, because I put some thought into it. And when I posted it up with the live stream announcement of the date and time, I had somebody on the ticker talker tell me that one word, sin. And I was like, oh, for crying out loud. So I'm going to go get into that ignorance a little bit. And I'm going to get into our founding fathers of the United States of America and how they even viewed that type of a person as an ignoramus. So this picture first, I want you to notice certain things in it, because we're going to get into these elements as part of the runes and magic. And you'll see that I divided the scene in half, where the side that Odin is on is darker, is dusky, and the side that Freyja is on is dawn. And Odin is wearing a dark blue mantle, and Freyja is wearing a red colored garment, and they're exchanging some tinctures and some runes. So even to the flowers in the field, I ensured that dandelions were used, because it is dandelions that are in the northern lands of our ancestors that would be growing this time of year, where the bees would be using those dandelions to make their honey for mead. And to the mountains in the background with the snow on it, because this time of year you still have the snow on the mountains up in the high peaks, and then you have the fir trees, the yew dales. And so there's a lot of messaging that I put into just that video alone, so, or that photo alone. So let me I'm reading this book, and it's got some, it's a book on the founding of America, and it's got to do with the Declaration of Independence, where it says nature's God and nature's laws. And it completely annihilates the fact that America was founded on Christian principles, that the founding of this nation was by what are called deists, but it's not the watchmaker God that has been programmed into the minds of what a deist is, where the God of the Bible pretty much winds things up and goes away. The Christians, the pastors at the time of America's founding, were calling the founding fathers, Jefferson, Adams, Washington, they were calling them atheists, and that the country was being overrun by atheists, because back then that's what a deist was. So I'm going to read a couple things out of this book, and then we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of the runes and magic. And then from there, we're going to progress into the battle slaying, as it's called, because the founding fathers, many of them, Thomas Young, Ethan Allen, I mentioned him in yesterday's video, they followed the philosophers of Epicurus and Lucretius, that what the origins of these elements of nature. And so this is like a summary in this book of Epicurus's dogma, his teaching. And he says, happiness in this life, it says, is everything. The highest form of happiness is freedom from pain in the body and tranquility of mind. That's going to be important. The surest path to happiness is a life of ordinary virtue. The greatest source of needless unhappiness are the misunderstandings that give rise to unquenchable desires and baseless fears. The worst of our misunderstandings involve the fear of inscrutable deities, and the fear of death. Religion exploits these fears for the benefit of priests and kings. Calm attention to the true nature of things allows us to cast aside harmful fears and superstitions and thereby to achieve happiness. Science, by which is meant the quiet pursuit of the understanding that brings happiness, is the only form of piety worth the name. So, science. I'm going to get into that as well. So, having that as the backdrop, you see, there's a saying, time heals all wounds. And I think that maybe some people have lost sight of what was done to our northern pagan ancestors and to what extent that Christians went to overrun our culture, to supplant it and replace it with something that was just completely opposite of what we were and are as a people. So he says in this book, yet nature's God properly belongs to the radical philosophical religion of deism. It refers to nothing that we commonly mean by the term God, but rather to something closer to nature. In another area, they say that the priests and religious leaders of the time referred to the founding fathers as confirmed infidels and howling atheists. And they even go as far as to show how common law that people like to subscribe to Christianity as getting its origins, the common law of England that was based off of judicial rulings, actually came from paganism. So moving on, I'm just making this quick because I really want to get into now. The state of Virginia during the Revolution was the most ungodly country on the face of the earth. The last was a generation of free thinkers, disciples of Hume, Voltaire, Bolingbroke, and there are very few persons of our years who have not received their first impressions from the same dye. So then John Adams, like the bulk of Jefferson's moral philosophers, maintained that the Christian religion, as it had been handed down through the centuries, amounted to so many impious fables and corruptions that the story of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection was an absurdity, that the doctrine of salvation through faith was detestable, invidious, and hurtful, and that the belief of original sin damned the whole human race without any actual crimes committed by any of them. Again, infidels. Now, this is where it's going to get into the science of things a little bit, because there were smallpox back then, and the Christian belief system said that inoculations were a sin. So the dangerous, this is on receiving the smallpox vaccination and others. Okay. It was it was called the dangerous and sinful practice of inoculation, represented in arrogation of God's unalienable right to deal death to sinners. The Reverend Timothy Dwight allegedly sermonized that if death by disease was in the cards for any certain person, it would be a frightful sin to avoid and annul that decree by the trick of vaccinations, end quote. The crime of blasphemy. Now, see, the reason I'm reading these is because you got to understand what was done throughout the course of history to forcibly convert. Instead, they brought him. This is talking about Ethan Allen when he refused the law that labeled getting a vaccine against smallpox as illegal. He refused that, went to the town square, took off his shirt, called the doctor out there, who was young, and he was also one of these of similar mindset, to inoculate him. And he was arrested for it. Even though they didn't continue with those charges, they switched the charge from receiving the inoculation into a charge of blasphemy because it carried a heavier weight. So instead, they brought him in for blasphemy. The laws against blasphemy at the time were fierce. So now this is that Thomas Young, one of the founding fathers, very prominent voice back then, said the whole story from the original sin of Adam to the day of judgment, he decided was one big fraud. This was the mindset of people back then. And this is how Christianity dealt with people throughout the course of history since that cult was invented. So this was also said how the careless behavior of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, he demanded to know, this is Ethan Allen, to know, be so unjustly imputed on their unoffending offspring. The Reverend replied that it was essential to believe in the fall of man. Without original sin, there would be no need for redemption, and therefore no need for our Redeemer. The pupil mulled, that would be Alan, the pupil, mulled over the problem for some days and came back with an answer. The Reverend was right. No original sin means no Jesus, and no Christian religion or Christian preacher for that matter. So again, I kind of pointed that out yesterday. I just didn't give you the exact quote from this book. So this was the impression of the God of the Bible. It was some unhuman, cruel, and distinctive being who delighted in woe and a pungent grief. So Thomas Jefferson wrote this in the notes on the state of Virginia. Is uniformity attainable? Millions of innocent men, women, and children since the introduction of Christianity have been burnt, tortured, fined, imprisoned, yet we have not advanced 1 inch toward uniformity. So that was not only the mindset of the founding fathers, but that is how Christianity dealt with anyone that thought outside of their programming. And what is important to remember is this: when the church labeled women, our pagan women folk, as witches, they weren't burning witches. They were burning women who were doctors and healers. So they labeled them as witches to try to invent something scary in the mind. And they didn't need to burn them all. I've heard some say, well, they didn't burn all the witches. They didn't need to. If you torture and imprison and you got just 10% of them, even, you control the rest of the population. So these are important things to remember as we go into the runes and magic. So, and I'm going to get into that right now. Well, hang on a minute. Before I do that, I want to go over this. I wrote this back in 2008 as part of a writing that I did. And so I just highlighted in yellow the word sorcerer or sorcery, any portion of that word. And then I highlighted where it came from. Now, the two New Testament times that it appears is Acts 8:9 and Acts 13:10. And both times there, it refers to magos, which in the Bible, they translate that as magi. So the magi, however many there were going to Jesus's birth, if you will, were evil. And this shows it. Okay. So when you look at these words, it's 6 times in the Bible, 4 times in the Old Testament. Okay. And you can see each one. You can screenshot that if you want to, so you can read it at your leisure. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but look at the words that they're taken from: pharmakos and pharmakos. And it's from those words that we get pharmacy, the science of things, the inoculation for smallpox and other sicknesses and ailments. So that is what the Christians during the founding days were imprisoning people for, was taking medication So any Christian that says this is sin, referring to my picture between Odin's runes and Freyja's tinctures and magic, if they take an aspirin, they are sinning according to their own Bible. Because look at in bold the cast of characters that they put those people who practiced sorcery with. They put them in with the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake that which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So, Christian, you got a headache? Take a Motrin, go get your flu shot, whatever you do, you're destined for the lake of fire. So, talk to me about your sin. That's in your Bible. Now, so we're going to move on to the runes, because in order to accurately speak about the runes and how Odin taught Freyja the runes, you have to know when these runes are available to Odin. Because Odin, and this is the part that is in one of our books, it's in our runes book, Northern Paganism Runes. Odin is, nighttime is called night only by men. And Odin has the name of Grimu, and Grimu is night by the Ginrigan, the beginning gods. So when you look down through what's written in that book, then you see that Odin, as Grimr, puts on a dark blue mantle and then passes through the fire. What fire in Grimness Mall? And I've addressed this before. This is the fire that is the doorposts of the pagan year. In autumn, you have blood month, when the herds are reduced in number so that you don't have to feed as many during the course of the winter. So that is one door month. Blood month is a doorpost. It is a fire because that is when Balder has diminished and your sun is going to only be skirting the horizon beginning around that time. That continues all the way through with Odin wearing the dark blue mantle until spring during what's called red month, which is the other fired post, the other side of the wintertime night sky, Odin's time, the father's time, and is when Balder starts to regain his strength. So that is very important to remember, because as Odin takes up the runes, as he's winding upon the mast, the famous roof beam, the fir tree that is Yggdrasil, that he hung upon, winded upon, clung to. It's in our books. The runes that he took up were the constellations, the nighttime constellations. Now, he teaches them to Freyja. Why Freyja? Why not somebody else? Because Freyja is the maiden. And in the course of the cycle of the year, May is indicative of the maiden. And so when you have that time of Ostri, when the sun starts to increase and the young are being born, and you have eggs and things like this in nature, that is when Freyja is prevalent. What else is prevalent? Like I showed in the picture, flowers. Things are starting to turn green. Things are starting to bloom. So the maiden would be able to collect the herbs needed to make the potions for healing, the ointments for healing. So Odin would teach Freyja, because that's the time of overlap when both Odin and Freyja are in play. So it makes only sense that Odin would teach Freyja the runes, and Freyja would teach Odin magic. So this is Völuspá, stanza 21. I hope it's the right one I want to be on here. Yes. Okay. This is showing that Balder was in that time with Hela, which I discussed yesterday, where it's just the glow. That is the fire that Angrboda's heart was burnt upon. Remember that great battle, first in homes, that gold strength Gory struck. The gold, the brightness of Balder was Gory struck in Hall of Hori, or in Hori's Hall. Why is it Hori's Hall? Because Hori represents frost, that the ice particles in the air that are on the ground, that deepness of winter. So this is Hori's Hall, and that it marries to the time when gold strength was Gory struck. It was a mocking or taunting glow, okay, or burn. And that's when Angrboda's heart was thrice burnt, thrice born, oft and again, though still lives. How often again? How is that possible? Because every day the sun would try to rise, and it would just be that glow, that fiery glow along the horizon. So for thrice months, for 3 lunar cycles, oft and again. So then when we go into stanza 22, then we see Heidi, in modern terminology, Heidi, her name, came to houses wheresoever. She was a wide-seeing prophetess. Now, these names, this wide-seeing, the word there is actually from a translation that means like a wide field. That how you can see for a long time off that through a wide open pasture. That's a wide, you have a wide view. So this prophetess or wise woman that was coming to visit was all-knowing, if you will. And actually the word for prophetess actually comes from, the first part of it is a vulva. So she was understanding or wise in magic, whose enchantment or spells was wise. This enchantment of the mind, she was playful. Like, now I mentioned this word Lycan yesterday with Hela. This was a like a trickery play. Like, you deceive the mind. Deceive the mind of who? To ill brides, it was an ointment. Who are the ill brides? Now, the Abrahamic translation of that says it was to evil women that were part of this. And that's because it takes it out of the context of what's going on, what's taking place. The ill brides, illar bruther, is what the words are in the Old Norse, were the pregnant women. Now, it could be, you could look at this as they were ill from being pregnant, the woe of wintertime. If you've never lived up north in the mountains, then there is a thing called cabin fever, and it sets in where you need to get out, you need to expand outside your cabin. So this prophetess that they call in the Abrahamic translation is a witch. They call her a witch. So a wide-seeing witch that comes in and treats evil women. And they're missing the point of who the prophetess is, the wise woman is. She is coming to give relief to the ill women. Now, a pregnant woman that has ills, you even have the possibility of, if they gave birth early, or it's, here it is, approaching spring, you have postpartum depression. And the ointment was a sweet odor that this prophetess brought. So was she just diluting the minds of these women to make them feel better as spring was drawing closer? Because there's nothing evil about that. When you look at stanza 21 compared with it, just before 21, 22, that's the order of counting, you have, and them describing how the gold strength was Gory struck in this Hori's Hall. It was a taunting, they're painting this very depressing image of the mindset of what a long winter, like a thimble winter, is like. So Freyja teaches Odin magic. Now, what is magic? Because and Odin teaches Freyja the runes. What is magic? Are we talking that different mixtures that you can make and from natural elements and take them to heal you? And because that's what Christians are forbidden to do. They can't take elements and put it into the body. If God wants to kill them, that is their fate per their God, as I just read to you. But our doctors, our seeresses, our prophetesses that were wise in this type of magic would go from home to home to heal people. I just read it to you. It's right there. They wheresoever they would go, where they were needed, and they would use these different elements to heal people. But what about abracapocus, hocus cadabra? A little throwback to some cartoons that I grew up with. And Bugs Bunny and the vampire, they went back and forth, abracadabra, hocus pocus, abracadabra, hocus pocus. And then I think it was Bugs came up with agracapocus or whatever. I don't know. So anyway, but what about this spell casting with the magic wand that we see in Hollywood and things like that? I have not personally seen it done ever. I have not. To me, I am a very hands-on person. I want to see the physical aspects of it. If somebody out there has done it, knows how to do it, I want to see it before I say, okay, it can be done. I want to see it done. Otherwise it is play acting. Now, to me, how would you be able to do it? Now we're going to get back into Epicurus and Lucretius. How would you be able to do it if it was possible? And I think what you need to do is you would have to be in touch with every element of nature. And you would have to almost be of the mind of like a pantheism, where you have the belief that one ultimate spirit flows through everything that there is in nature, in the cosmos, that it's one spirit that imbues everything. And then you would have to be so adept in your knowledge of that one spirit that you could command it to act upon your will. So that is very deep. And I'm not saying that back then they couldn't do that when nature was not corrupted by Abraham, when things were more pure, and that was their focus and their intention was to use it to heal our folk. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm not saying they couldn't. I don't know. I was not there. What I am saying is I have not seen it done in my lifetime, or have heard of it being done. And I'm eliminating TBN, where they say, by the power of Jesus, you're healed. And the whole fucking first 20 rows fall down backwards. And I didn't cuss there. I said, frickin'. So the command over that spirit that imbues everything would have to be immense in order for it to happen. And the mind would have to be so in tune with being able to manipulate it, where they could then not only manipulate it for their own will, but to then project it onto something or someone else. And the level of depth in being able to do that, I don't think it exists today with anyone that's not playing. So I have got to pull up my YouTube portion of this, because I don't know if anybody's commenting. So let me check real quick. And it's supposed to be showing up on mine. And there's Odin Manuson. Hey, how you doing? Hey, Zerliath, how you doing? All right. I'm not ignoring you guys. It wasn't popping up on my feed. So it should be showing over here on the sides here. Private chat. There we go. Start the conversation. So I'm going to move now into another section, and that is the Valkyrie and the battle slain. In order to do that, I've got to get some things loaded up onto my screen here, because this only lets me put a certain number of thumbnails up here. So just give me a couple seconds. All right. Three more. Good thing this goes quick. 101. 102. Yeah, I'm only allowed 10 items on my screen to throw on so you can see it. And so if I do one where I have different items and I have to delete some and add others, and unfortunately you can't batch add them to the screen. You have to do one at a time. So let me see, 100, 1, 2, and 3. Yes. Okay. So with the erroneous translation of the battle slain, what our lore says is properly translated from Grimness Mall 14. It says Folkvang, or the field of folk. This is Freyja's field of folk is the 9th, and there Freyja rules or judges, seat choice in payment, half the valiant or choice. She chooses every day, then half Odin upon. So right off the get-go, we see Freyja chooses first, then Odin chooses half of the valiant. Now, why do I say half the valiant and not half the battle slain, like the fake translations, the mistranslated versions tell us? Because I'm correct. That's why. And I properly translated it using etymology, nature, and the cosmos. And here's the nuts and bolts of things: is Freyja chooses first because the northern pagan year starts in the spring, the time of the maiden. And so Freyja gets first choice every single day of the valiant. And then the second half of the year, after Mother's time passes and we rotate into fall and then winter time, when Odin is called off the Thulian seat by Freyja, then Odin chooses every day. Half then half. How do we see this? Well, we look at the springtime sky chart and we see over on the side of the screen by the west shore, you see the Father's Time hero is Thor. And that Father's Time hero is about ready to rotate westerly off the field of view, out of the field of view. And who comes in but from the east? You have the Mother's Time hero, Thor. And that Mother's Time hero that is Thor rotates in at this time of year. So we move from that time right there where Freyja is getting ready to choose. And then you have now, there it is, Mother's Time hero is directly overhead every day, every single day. And then Freyja chooses and gives seat choice. Now, why is her hall called Sesrumnir? Because Sesrumnir means roomy seated. No more cabin fever. People are outside doing things. And so there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room to sit down. There's a lot of room for children to play. And so in our books, we show that about Freyja's hall, Sesrumnir in Folkvang means roomy seated. And Folkvang means field of folk. Thus, Freyja's hall is in a field of folk, which is spaciously seated. Recall on Grimness Null 14, it says that Freyja chooses half of the valiant first, then Odin gets the other half. If Freyja has first choice, why is it that Abrahamic translators have not discussed and sought insight into her hall with utmost vigor? That's a rhetorical question, but you know what? Think about it. One of the names of Freyja is in Skald's Copper Mall, of the Prose Edda, is Thrung or Thrungva. And it said that Thor is an old time friend. So of Freyja. So we see this in that spring and then summer sky chart. Then what happens in the autumn when on the right hand side of the western shore. Now the Mother's Time hero is getting ready to rotate out of view. So then Freyja's choice will be completed. And then coming in over on the eastern shore, you see the Father's Time hero is about ready to rotate into view. And up on the north shore, you have the Great Bear, which is the Und of Odin, the spirit of Odin, being ready to come off from the Thulian Sea as given the wake-up call from Freyja. And then you go into the winter, and there is the Father's Time hero directly overhead, where Odin has his second choice because his time of the year comes second. How do we know that it's not that it doesn't mean battle slain? Because when we look at other words, we have Val is used in conjunction with them. So when you look up the word, what does Val mean? You look up the etymology of valiant, and it comes from the wall, W-A-L. You see it written in bold down there on the screen. It's an Proto-Indo-European root. Now, what I want you to do is I'm going to read some of these words to you. I want you to contrast and compare them to what we learned about Hela and Hela's Hall yesterday. Now, remember, Hela's Hall was El Yuthnir, and it means a want of energy or a weakness. And that's what Loki's name means, that self-loathing, that lackingness. And you compare what Val means, and it is to rule over, to have power, rule, dominion, to be able. And that it sounds much more like somebody who would be chosen by a Valkyrie. So, but let's look at that word, the Valkyrie. Okay. Because if you look up the etymology of choice, what it shows is it comes from the Old Norse word chosa. About halfway down the page, I highlighted it. It's in bold. Okay. And that means to choose. In Icelandic, chosa means to choose, select, to desire, wish, to elect. And it is from Icelandic that we get the word that is the word Valkyrjur. Valkyrjur. Now, this was changed to Valkyrie, meaning chooser of the slain, battle slain nonetheless, in the year 1768. It's almost down toward the bottom, right above the number 1 and the number 2, where it says Val and Chosa. 1768 is when etymology shows that Valkyrie was invented to mean battle slain. 1768. Tell me that's not a Christian invention and interpolation. So the Odin and Freyja, with their overlap, not only do you get the runes being passed to Freyja, you have magic, whatever type of magic you want to believe that to be, whether it's ointments that were given to pregnant brides who needed some medical attention from a wide-seeing healing person, prophetess, a healer, or pagan women who were labeled as witches and burned because Christianity viewed that as a sin for which they would be cast into hell and burned in the second death. I just covered it earlier in the video. So you have that overlap, and then you have the overlap between the two of them based on the cycle of the pagan year, that Odin chooses first, or I'm sorry, Odin chooses second, because that time of the year came second. So we have a comment on here, self-loathing like the traitors, Lokians, who don't care if Europeans disappear. I 100% agree. I can't share that over to my screen. For some reason, it's not letting me do that through StreamYard today. And then Oliver Brook says, I'm interested in your books. Link on your YouTube isn't actually active, FYI. Okay, I will look into that. If you go on to Amazon and you type in Northern Paganism with my name, Scott Carlson. It should pop up. Every one of them says Northern Paganism on it. But I will definitely look into that and see what's going on with that and correct any issues that it might have. So thank you for letting me know that. And what I want to do is I'm going to put up a little reminder here. Let me take that off the screen, because yesterday I addressed it kind of late, and I'm trying to get this information out there to more people. And the only way that's possible is if people like and subscribe and share. And I do want to hear your comments, especially if they're deeper than just the one word, say sin, or, oh, I'll pray for you. Okay. Give me some depth here, because I used to teach that bunk, and I taught myself right out of it. So I don't care about your one word posts on there, your drive-bys, just depth of conversation, and we'll go from there. So that is the entire overlap in the runes and magic, and that is the destruction of the terminology that Abraham invented, terminology of battle slain, because there is a lot of valiant pagan ancestors from our past. Okay, here, perfect example. For all the people that get their paganness from Hollywood or from the History Channel show that came out that seems to have people dressing like the actors and actresses in that show, Ragnar did not die in battle. If you read the saga, Ragnar's saga, then he did not die in battle. So therefore, what you're saying is Ragnar is not in Valhalla. What about Brynhild telling Sigurður Saman that everybody needs that spirit that is Sigurður Saman shall never die? That spirit of Sigurd didn't die in battle. Sigurd died in bed. And Brynhild, after Sigurd died, Brynhild was forced to marry a person who had no valiancy, and then she took her own life. She didn't die in battle. So if you're going to abide by the battle slain to get to Valhalla, that complete abomination that is that, then you have got to rectify somehow in your own brain how the heroes of the stories that didn't die in battle are somehow in Valhalla. It doesn't make it, the pieces of the puzzle just don't fit together. The Valkyrie are choosers of the valiant, the maidens. If you have a young daughter and she is entering that age where she's going to be looking for her spouse, then she's going to be making her choice, hopefully, based on the valiancy she sees in the man she chooses. And it's not just a one-time thing. If you read the culture of our northern pagan ancestors, women could leave their husbands if they did not provide for them well, if they did not step up to the plate and be a man, if they were poor in that area as well and not satisfying to them, the women could go stand at the bedpost of her bed and say, I divorce you. You are no longer valiant. So therefore, I no longer choose you. It wasn't a one and done. It was a choice every day. Just like Freyja chooses every day. It was a choice every day. It required the man to act like a man every day so that his woman would choose him repeatedly, daily. And they would pass that strength on to their young, the spirit that shall never die. So that is this video. I hope you liked it. And I'm a little bit frustrated that these comments were not auto-populating over. Just there's cool. I'm glad you liked it. Odin Manuson and Oliver Brook just bought it. Looking forward to it. Okay, awesome. Glad you found it. And I'm going to end that right here. Please, again, I never put my scroll up there, I don't think, but like, comment, subscribe, share. Let's get this word out there, because our culture has been run through the ringer by the cults of Abraham, and we need to take it back. And the way to do that is to let people know it. So I will stop that right here. And until next time, or tills nästa gång, good health, sir.